Hi, friends. I'm Rob Tigan.
And I'm Joanna, and this is the Growing Home Together podcast.
We're caring for the soul of your family, helping you grow closer to God
and each other. Thank you for joining us today for the Growing Home Together podcast. Now, I don't know about your family, but at our house, we have a few weeks of the school year under our belt. And maybe your kids are already feeling stressed about upcoming tests or exams. Or maybe they're exhausted as they juggle after-school clubs and sports and a pile of homework every night. Or maybe you're watching them disappear into their phones for hours as they try to decompress from a long and stressful day. I know each of us had high hopes for an amazing school year after all the craziness of learning in the pandemic, but you're watching your child cave to stress, discouragement, and pressure every day.
Right, Joanna. And as a dad, I never want school to steal the joy and excitement from my child's heart. I want learning to feel engaging, to bring out my child's passions and talents, to be a place where they develop deep relationships that build them up. I know you want that for your kids too. So the question we're asking today is, why is there often such a major gap between our dreams for our children and the educational life they're actually living? To help us answer this question, we are going to welcome our guest today, Janet Newberry, to the show.
Janet Newberry is an educational consultant who spent more than 30 years in the education arena, both as a teacher and an administrator in public and private schools. And Janet is also an author, a speaker, and a self-proclaimed love researcher. Can't wait to hear about that. And she is here to give us a whole new vision for how to teach and love our children so they can grow and thrive. Thank you so much, Janet, for joining us today.
Thank you both. It is such an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Well, yes, thank you, Janet. And so Joanna and I are the parents of 5 kids, and we've utilized pretty much every form of schooling there is over the years, short of boarding school. I don't think we've tried that one
not yet.
But that may be
it's
coming.
Still on the list.
Yes. But our kids have experienced years of homeschooling plus years of public and private school along the way through the years. And I know you too have served students in a wide variety of contexts. So before we jump into our talk today, can you give us kind of the helicopter view of learning and tell us the primary goal of education for our kids?
Yes, a helicopter view of learning. Well, and I'm going to just start in a place of connection with you both. Doug and I have 5 kids.
Awesome.
And we have 12, and we have 12 grandchildren. So, and Doug and I both graduated from public school, and our children all graduated from public school. And I worked for the first 19 years as a teacher and an administrator in public school before the Lord would move me to a tiny town in Texas called Fredericksburg, and I became head of school at Ambleside School of Fredericksburg for a season. And it was a beautiful season because I saw children experience education differently, and I saw myself experience education differently, even as a head of school. And it was also very valuable because we held internships at Ambleside that welcomed educators from around the world to see how the philosophy of Charlotte Mason was implemented at our school. And so in 6 years, I got to speak with 800 different educators from around the country and around the world. And we got to talk about what is our goal and where are we stuck? And the goals were all similar. Education is about helping children learn. Primarily, I think that's how we would define traditional education. I like to define education as about helping children grow up in healthy relationships, including healthy relationships with reading and math and history and science and art and music and all things beautiful. But the common answer from almost everyone that I spoke to in educational leadership was, what do we do when kids struggle? And Joanna, you just pointed to many different ways that kids could be struggling already in a brand new school year.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question, Rob?
Yes. Yeah. And, I First of all, I have to say we're going to probably have to talk to you a little bit about the grandparenting thing because we just found out we're going to be grandparents for the first time. So
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, you've got a little history on us there with the 12 grandkids. That's awesome. So, but yes, that was very helpful.
Yeah. And, Rob and I are pretty deep into reading your book, Education by Design, Not Default. And you compare our kids' educational process to the training of high-level athletes. And you say as they move through their school years that they suffer performance injuries, just like, say, a gymnast who permanently wrecks her knee on the vault. Can you explain what kinds of performance injuries our kids are suffering in our current ways of doing school?
It's a great question, and I love the analogy, even though it's somewhat painful when you think about it this way. But when we send our children to school, or when we teach our children that education is about performing, and every day there is a goal to get 100 in spelling and 100 in math and 100 in reading and 100 in all of our subjects, and to make the A team and to have the highest batting average. Oftentimes, the fuel that our children run on is a slow drip of cortisol, which is the fear hormone. And fear is meant for our good in healthy situations. It's meant to help us run away from danger or stand and fight with supernatural strength if we need to save our life. But we're not meant to live with a slow drip of cortisol in our fueling system. And I literally talk in my book about a family recipe for fuel as either love-based fuel or fear-based fuel. And some of my favorite research, I call myself a love researcher because I find it fascinating that as Christians, we have really one commandment: love one another. Mm-hmm. And we don't hear too many sermons about it. And and when Jesus says they will know you are my disciples because you love one another, sometimes I think that gets lost, not only in religion, but in school. And so my excitement is to help people unpack that. And there is a way for children to do well in school and in sports because they are loved well, not simply because they are pushed hard and not because they're afraid of failure. And one of the specific performance injuries that our children can have is an identity crisis. And I think, Rob, you could probably relate to this because our children often, when they struggle at school, we need a way to explain that to ourselves. And so we often give them a label. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's a diagnosis. And unlike a medical diagnosis, even something as significant and severe as a cancer diagnosis, you don't have to be very old to know that people have a hope from healing for cancer. We even sell cancer-free T-shirts, and people know that there is great hope when you persevere, that you could live cancer-free. But we don't share that same hope when children struggle at school. No one tells them that you may not have this struggle with dyslexia forever. It may not always look like this. You may not always have a learning difficulty in math or a learning difficulty in reading. And so sometimes the performance injury is an identity crisis where we take on our identity based on the label we've been given by our struggle. The other kind of performance injury we can get is just stuck in what I call a traditional, and I'm going to use the word dysfunctional here, lifestyle, in that we perform all day long. And then in the evenings, we spend our time in pain relief. And so we are so exhausted from the cortisol rush and the perform in this subject, perform in the next, perform in our after-school activities. And Joanna, you said, and then they just binge on their screens when they get home. That would be like an adult binging with a few glasses of wine. right? We need
Right.
something to relieve the pain of all the push, all the performing that we've done. And so there are really two basic ways to live life. A traditional way in America is often to get stuck in this perform pain relief loop. I get up and I perform, and I come home and I binge on pain relief, as opposed to a life by design loop where I know that life is about working and struggling and playing and connecting in healthy relationships so that I do those things well. And there is a way to restore my stress response cycle, to complete my stress response cycle at the end of the day, instead of just numb it with pain relief. So it's a long answer, but it's an important conversation to have.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've had conversations with other experts on this podcast, specifically about how to help our kids cope with stress and anxiety. And I think what's a lot different in this conversation is you're inviting us to look at this from a whole new angle of considering the why our kids are so stressed in the first place. And when you presented that idea of the steady drip of fear hormone, that really got me thinking hard. And so my question, as my son is in this school year now, is how can he aspire to do his best in a graded classroom without falling into that whole performance mode?
Mm-hmm. And it's a great question. And here's the summary of my research. And I want to get to your specific question, so don't let me go on a rabbit trail and not come back. But here's the summary: is when we aim at the target of performance, when getting a good grade is what he wakes up to do every day, or getting be the high scorer in the basketball game or whatever. When we aim at the target of performance, two things get stunted. One, our maturity gets stunted, and two, our relationships get stunted. And the reason that happens is back to cortisol. All right, when cortisol is flowing through our system, two other systems get shut down. One is our immune system. Right? Our immune system gets weakened by a constant drip of cortisol. And if there's ever a time when we need our kids to have strong immune systems, it's now. And two, anything associated with growing. Because if you think about fight and flight, you don't need to grow hair or fingernails when you're running away from a bear or standing and protecting yourself in a fight. Growth is not your body's priority when you've got a rush of cortisol or even a drip of cortisol. And so maturity, the literal maturity and development of a brain, slows down when we run on cortisol, when we live with that performance target. But here's the good news. If we switch that priority around, if we aim at the target of building healthy relationships and intentionally supporting maturity, performance never fails to go off the chart. I haven't seen it in over 30 years of education and 10 years specifically of consulting. I've never seen children not outperform what they had previously experienced when they were actually trying to get good grades. And so the way that your son can begin to think about that, one is you can give him new language. You can give him a simple language of, remember today, this is about building a healthy relationship. Let's make it with a sport. What sport does your son play a sport?
He likes soccer and tennis.
Yeah. But actually,
Okay.
his main official pursuits are more musical.
Okay, so that would be
Piano lessons.
piano. Okay,
Yes.
so to help him put words to his why and say, why do I practice piano? Right? I practice piano because my passion is music, and because I love the way I feel when I play the piano and I want people to experience that passion when I play it for them. I want to share this passion with them. And so when he is focusing on that why, he's doing what scripture said. He's letting perfect love cast out fear. That passion to love piano comes from God.
Mm.
It is a gift that he has. And the love will, here's the cool thing being a love researcher, I know this to be true. Science has proven that their oxytocin is the love hormone. So when we have oxytocin flowing through our system, our body's literally in our blood. Maturity takes place. Oxytocin is required for maturity to happen, and it actually is a stronger fuel than fear and a healthy fuel, and it is stronger than cortisol. So once we have engaged with a love, the why of love, once we have engaged with someone who sees us the way God sees us and reminds us that it's not about our perfect performance, but it really is about growing and developing a healthy relationship, even if we struggle. I mean, if he gets a piece of music and it's difficult and it's not as fun as the last piece of music, to think of it as love helping him grow, to think of it as a way of disciplining himself for the future. And love is a beautiful source of discipline. To teach our children to sort things instead of I'm good at this or I'm bad at this, I'm afraid of this, or I know this is love. I know this is good for me because it's love. Our kids are good at sorting things into good and bad and right and wrong, and we can help them become fluent in sorting things in the categories of love and fear. And turning off that faucet of fear gives us the opportunity to teach ourselves and our children how to turn on the faucet of love.
That's really good. And connecting a lot of dots here from my own educational experience. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that. Both your idea of love, which is so great, and then also the idea of struggle that you talk about in the book, because, I grew up with a learning disability. I had dyslexia, and so I can remember hours, spending hours at the table doing my homework, trying to learn, and trying to get stuff done and trying to figure this out. And I can remember teachers throughout my experience that really looked me in the eye and knew cared about me and the progress I could make in that. It was a struggle regardless. And what I love you talk about in your book is that, we often in a arena of performance where all the focus is on performance and getting the A, we pretty quickly put people in their kind of pecking orders and their categories. And so struggle is kind of seen as something that's bad and that we should avoid. But you in the book talk about that's not the case. So why isn't struggle something to be avoided in the learning process, do you think?
And I think you probably experienced this, Robin, even just in telling those stories. You remembered the teachers who believed you could grow, right? And you connected with those in those healthy relationships. And when you did, oxytocin began to have its way in your brain, in your body, and it literally began to develop new neural pathways. It began to untangle some of the pathways that were not working the way that was helpful to you. And you allowed that to happen because you trusted the love from those people. You would not have had that experience without the struggle that initiated those relationships. And so I dare to even ask the question in the first chapter of my book, what if struggle is a gift? Because and in a performance obsessed culture, we think struggle is a reason to panic. And we very early on teach our children that struggle is a reason to panic. And so we hide our struggles. We lie to ourselves about our struggles. We give ourselves identities based on our struggles. But if struggle is a gift, if struggle is a way to connect with the people who believe I can grow as a result of my struggle, and I can trust those people. And that is a relationship with God.
Yeah.
That is really, in its simplest form, the gospel. We're a mess, right? And Jesus says, I can help you. Will you trust me? That is the gospel. And if
Hmm.
we can apply that gospel message to when our children struggle with reading and with math, I know that your struggle is real, and I know I can help you. Will you let me? My favorite one piece of coaching advice to parents whose kids struggle with homework: just sit at the table with them. And you may be balancing your checkbook while they're answering their reading comprehension questions. You don't even have to be helping them. But if you have a trusting relationship with your kid where you just say, I know you've got work to do, so do I. I'm going to sit here and do my work and let me know if I can help you. Your presence lends them strength. All of a sudden, perfect love has cast out fear from that environment. They're not thinking, ugh, I have to sit here all by myself until I get this done, and I'll never be able to do what I want because I don't know how to do what I have to do. And all of a sudden, perfect love cast out fear, and progress is now possible. And so it's just a beautiful design that struggle, in this world, we will have struggle, and take heart. As we
Yeah.
have a helper.
Yeah.
We have a helper. And so to think that we have to be independently successful and independently perfect is nothing we can really accomplish in our own human strength. And we don't want to raise independent children. We want to raise dependable children. And we want to raise children who are dependent on God and others in a healthy, relational sort of way. And so education has kind of given us the wrong message in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I look back, I would go to kind of the special classes. I remember where I would get, special fixed attention on my reading and that kind of thing. But it was my fifth grade teacher. I remember, spelling was always, for someone with dyslexia, obviously is never fun. But this teacher, I knew she just cared about me as a person, and it wasn't about the grade. And just like you said, that cast out the fear and gave me, so at the end of my school year in fifth grade, I was in the top of our class with the spelling. And I'm going from the bottom at the beginning of the year, and it was just because I knew she believed in me as a person. And all of a sudden that performance aspect went away from it, and it did cast out that fear, and it allowed me to struggle through it, and grow from it. So I love that.
Thank you for confirming my research. That
Oh,
some people think, well, we can't just. And I was hoping that that would be the end of your story, and I was okay if it wasn't. But when I say, I mean, when we focus on building healthy relationships, performance, I mean, I've yet to see it not go off the chart, at least in some way or shape or form. And I tell the specific stories about students in my book that had real struggles. And sometimes we just had to back off from anything that looked like education. The story I tell about Mary, we just had to back off and let those fears of struggle and fear of anything school related begin to unplug themselves and to really just build a relationship of trust together. And still, even though we spent like 3 months playing Uno outside on a picnic table under an oak tree, which seemed like a big waste of time if you were looking for performance.
right.
We sheeted 2.5 years of math by May. Once we got started, she loved math, and it was her favorite subject, and it was something that she had never experienced success in before.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
God has a way, and his way works. So
Yeah,
I'm
for
sticking with
sure.
this.
For sure. Yeah. So, I know for us, as parents, we had a lot of sleepless nights wrestling with the question of what do we do? Where do we send our kids to school? Do we keep sticking it out in this current situation, or is there another situation that would meet our kids' needs better? So what would you tell the parent who's wondering if they should make a change for their kid's school situation, or if they should maybe start homeschooling, or what their options are?
Yeah, it's such a big question, and COVID has made it even bigger. And as much as we like to believe that this school year is going to not be as affected by COVID as the last one, that's still yet to be determined. um, and so it is a big question, even if we're not in the middle of a pandemic. And I would just applaud you for asking the question and being brave enough to ask the question as a parent, because I think if you've been raised in a traditional setting where it's always been public school for your family, or it's always been private school for your family, and you feel like maybe it's not working so well with your child, with your family dynamics, then I just applaud you for being brave enough to ask the question. And look at your options. And I would say look at your options regularly. If you don't look at them every semester, look at your options every year and just ask yourself, who is this working for? And how do we know that it's working for our child? And then explore your options and think about not where struggle is not going to be a part of the story, but where struggle is going to be met with love, where there is a focus on healthy relationships, not just on legalistic, moralistic, right and wrong, independently of healthy relationships. And if homeschooling is something you think you can do well with your child, and when I say do well, I don't mean you have to be an expert in every academic area, but you think it's going to be a benefit to your relationship with your child, and a benefit because your child is going to get to breathe in some different air for a little while in an academic setting, then there's all kinds of help out there. And find some help to help you homeschool. Find a co-op, find a resource available to you so that you don't have to do it alone. But I just think pray about it, ask the Lord to help you, talk about it if you're married as a couple, and be on the same page, because it's very hard to make a change. I've worked with many families where the mom wants to make a change and the dad does not. And sometimes making that change makes things worse instead of better, because the parents aren't on the same page and they're pulling against each other and the kid feels stuck in the middle. And so lots of things to consider in that. It's a big question, and it's one that that you can make again in 6 months and again in a year. So trust your instincts, trust that God has equipped you to make that decision and will help you make that decision, and ask some good questions.
Yeah. And let's be honest, with this COVID learning process, I'm probably not the only one that's thought of boarding school as an option here and there.
No, I find what you're saying to be so reassuring.
Some of our children have thought of that for some of our grandchildren.
And honestly, our kids were stuck at home with us too, so they might have been the first ones to the door.
Probably.
Yeah, but that's really reassuring, because I think for Rob and I, our kids have not been educated in, I guess, what looks like a straight line. We have made some significant transitions for each of them over the years as it was needed, like you're saying. And sometimes you think, gosh, all of this transition is maybe going to somehow be harmful to our child. And I think for us, we had to realize that it wasn't the transition that was the threat. It was maybe leaving them in a situation where their needs weren't being met very well that was a greater threat. And so it's just nice to have someone say that, yes, affecting change in your kids' schooling journey can be the best for them.
It really can be the best for them. I know from my own experience, and it wasn't because of any other reason, but my dad was a pastor in small little Texas towns, and we moved a lot when I was little. So I went to 8 different elementary schools, all public elementary schools. I made a lot of changes, and not necessarily for all the reasons that we're talking about, but struggle was a gift to me in that regard, because I got to learn how to make change. And I got to learn how to build new relationships. And so to think that you have to keep doing what you've always been doing when it's not working, can I just relieve you of that pressure? can I just help you dismiss that myth? And it may not look like a straight line because your kids' needs may change, your family's needs may change, and just give you permission to not feel like you have to defend what you've always done or do what everyone else is doing, but you get to do what is love for your family.
Hi friends, Rob and Joanna Tigan of Growing Home Together are the parents of 5 kids ranging in age from elementary school to high school to adult newlyweds. They know the fun and joy and also the stress and confusion that could come with raising kids through all the ages and stages of growing up. Just like you, they worry over their children's safety and well-being. They feel the pressure to train their kids to do what's right, and they carry sadness when their kids struggle or make poor choices. And as parents like you, their greatest hope is to bring up children who know God's love in their life. But Rob and Joanna know they can't control what happens to their kids or the people they become. They have learned how important it is to place their sons and daughters in God's hands. And most of all, they have learned the power of prayer to make a difference in their children's lives. That is why they are so passionate to help moms and dads like you to pray for your kids. They created 2 amazing resources, Powerful Prayers for Your Son and Powerful Prayers for Your Daughter. These beautiful books offer page after page of targeted prayers that cover every kind of challenge and hope your kids will face as they grow. Is your child facing hard circumstances? Are they lonely or anxious? Do they struggle to know God or trust Him? Is it hard to build a close relationship together? Take hold of Powerful Prayers for Your Son and Powerful Prayers for Your Daughter to invite God's love and power into your child's life today. Each title is available for you at growinghometogether.com or wherever books are sold. And now, back to the show.
And one thing that you also unpack in your book is our kids' schooling experience is not just about their academics. It's also their relational piece, their emotional piece. I mean, our kids are having a lot of experiences through the day that have nothing to do with what ends up on their report card. And, you have a quote in your book that grieved my heart because we lived it with our son. And you said, the conduct standards at school assume that every child of the same age has reached a standard level of maturity and they can keep their hands and feet to themselves and listen attentively. And when children can't keep up or follow the rules, they're punished. And punishment looks at the child and says, "Shame on you," as if shame is going to help. And you say children don't get help because they get punished because they need. And when our son was younger, he had some challenging behaviors due to some past trauma and ADHD, and he experienced exactly that. And, he began internalizing this destructive belief that he was inherently bad. But, he wasn't bad at all. He's precious. He just needed help. So can you explain to us why the common behavior modification methods in most classrooms do more to hurt our kids than help them?
In the next 30 seconds, probably not, but it's such a powerful question. And, behavior modification is a word that we use a lot and we rely on it. It has become a tradition in parenting and a tradition in a lot of forms of schooling. And it neglects to look at this truth. Behavior is always the echo of belief. Behavior is always the mirror of belief. And it is often behavior is also the fruit of our maturity. And so I'll take those 2 ideas separately. When I say behavior is the echo of belief, when your son is believing that he is inherently bad, right? If there's a black sheep in the family, and I say that with reverence and with grief, because most families could have a black sheep in the family, and the black sheep knows who they are. Mm-hmm. And behavior is the echo of belief. And so if I believe I am inherently bad, my behavior will be bad, We behave out of our identity. That's why it is vital for the family and the home to be the safe place, to be reminded and to experience people who see us the way God sees us, right? We may
Yeah.
be immature right now. We may be making poor choices, but God sees us as his child. And he, as a believer, I have a new heart, and I no longer struggle with the same things that I did before I believed that Jesus died and was resurrected to give me his life. I have his life living in me, so I have a source that I didn't have before. And so it's one of the reasons we get to and must, and I don't use that word very often, teach our children to be dependent on their parents, and dependent in the same way we want them to be dependent on God. Remind me who I am again, God. I'm capable because you say I'm capable. Remind me who I am again, Mom. I'm capable because you say I'm capable. You don't say I'm bad. You say I'm good, and I'm learning how to live in good ways. And there's a world of difference between a kid who goes to school every day and has to change their color or move their clip, and that means they're bad, that they're being punished, they're being publicly shamed for their misbehavior. And it probably is that their belief about themselves is what needs to be addressed before their behavior can be addressed. I believe you can do it. I believe you're learning how. Will you let me help you? Right? There's the key question. Will you let me help you? Will you look at the person sitting right beside you, and will you do what they're doing when it's time to listen? Will you look where their hands are? And we, to just remind them that there are good models in our world today, and we can learn from each other in healthy relationships, not shameful relationships. But here's the other thing that I have to say about this, and because you mentioned this about your son, and I think the story in my mind is that your son was a young age. I don't know for sure. Even if he was 13, I mean, I'm back in a public school classroom because of COVID right now, and I'm teaching 13 and 14-year-olds, and maturity is not their strong suit. And it's not for 5 and 6-year-olds either in our culture today. And the best resolution for misbehavior is maturity. And I will say that again, and you can quote me on this. The best resolution for misbehavior is maturity, not punishment. And we can hijack that with shame. And we can hijack that with punishment. We can destroy trust in our relationships. Discipline, yes. Discipline is about the person growing up into who God says they are. Punishment is about paying for the behavior that happened in the past. So there's the difference. Punishment is about the behavior that happened in the past and assigning a penalty to it. Discipline is about the person and helping them move into the future in a more mature way, and helping them move into the future in a more mature way. And so when you ask, about the common behavior modification methods, I would just say, write this down. Behavior is the echo of belief. And so start there. Start there. Ask yourself, what is my child believing to be true about themselves right now? And is it true? And where did they get that message? And then write this down. The best resolution for misbehavior is maturity. How am I helping them grow up? And growing up happens in a culture of love, not a culture of fear and shame.
Right. And you're talking about our kids taking hold of their identity, but I think what I'm hearing you say too is that as adults, maybe we need to reframe our identity, because I think when the authority figures in my son's life didn't have a primary identity as a rule giver, but instead had that identity of helper, like you're saying, everything changed. I mean, my son had a teacher who took on that helper identity, and she's like, how can I help you behave and follow the rules? Do you need a sensory break? Do you need some creative seating options? Do you need some coaching from somebody who's an expert on maybe some social skills? How can I validate the times that you show self-control and that I see you're being a good friend and you're sticking with a task to the end? And, it changed everything for him. And if you met him now, you'd never know that any of those behaviors were ever even on the table. He's just hitting it on all cylinders. But that's what he needed, was someone who was not a rule giver, that was punitive, but somebody who really took on a role of helper for him. So that's a really great challenge from you for us, even as parents. Like, yes, we're parents. Yes, we need to hold our kids to a standard, but to be helpers first, I think, can change things a lot.
And it's often when our children's shame is inflamed, oftentimes because our shame is inflamed. And when our kids don't make the mark, we feel ashamed, and they catch that from us. And so sometimes we have to do our own work of letting the truth of the gospel put out the flame of shame in our own stories, so that our children's shame is not ignited by the shame that we feel because of their performance. And so there's so much to unpack about this one, but I love the great examples that you included about how your son's teacher was a helper. Very specific examples that I think are practically helpful.
Yeah. Well, and I think, whether you're a parent or an educator or not, they should pick up your book, Education by Design, Not Default, because you give so much great information in here on just how to kind of shift our thinking on how to approach our kids' education and how to come alongside them and help them as parents or educators. So it's great. But as we're talking, we're a little bit into the school year, and I'm worried that there might be parents listening that are feeling pretty discouraged right now. Their kids are already stressed and tired, and they see a long school ahead of them, and they're ready to quit, and maybe switching their school option isn't on the table for them. So, they can't maybe walk into the classroom and transform the culture and the methods and the way their teachers are doing things. So what are some specific steps parents can take, do you think, that will help their children to grow and thrive where they are right now?
Yeah, it is a great question, and it is a reality for probably most families. And I think the clearest answer I could give on that is give yourself permission as a family to focus on growth, to focus on growing in the areas of struggle. Maybe it's reading or history or math or growing in a relationship with, I don't know, there could be a toxic coach or a toxic teacher, and to grow in your relationship with the Lord and with a trusted adult that helps you navigate a toxic relationship that you can't avoid right now. There's all kinds of ways that we could focus on growth and focus on sorting truth from lies with our children instead of focusing on perfection. And if our home is a place that is safe but not soft, because I say that is a good description of love. It's safe but not soft. I will not lie to you about your struggle, but I will protect you from shame. Mm-hmm. And so we have a safe place to unpack our struggles and to be honest about our emotions, and to ask someone who will help us keep our emotions in the passenger seat of our car instead of in the driver's seat of our behavior. And we can literally, I would almost like hang a dry erase board in your, breakfast room, and put a T chart on it, 2 columns, and write lies in one column and truth in the other. And when your kids start feeling emotional at the end of the day, or hey, when you start feeling emotional at the end of the day, just just let them dictate to you. Tell me how you're feeling. And when they say I'm stupid, write it down, but write it down in the lie column. I'll never learn, write it down in the lie column, and when they're calm, come back and write the truth that goes with the lies. There's a beautiful story in my book about Mary, a student, an 11-year-old student who was very triggered by fear and had some deeply embedded lies about herself. And we did that in January. We had been working together for months, and she kind of regressed a little bit one day, was pushed back in the ditch of fear, and by her struggle to learn how to type and how to do keyboarding. And so we went through that exercise that I just described, where we wrote down all of the lies. She went into a tirade one day, and I just started transcribing what she was dictating in her emotional outburst. And then when she was calm, we wrote down the truth. And so the next time she attempted her keyboarding lesson, I said, Mary, I don't care how fast you type, and I don't care how many words you get right. I said, every time you hear the buzzer that says you made a mistake, I want you to speak out loud a truth from the board. And so she'd hit the buzzer and say, I can learn. And she'd hit the buzzer and say, you can help me, And so she was replacing the lies with the truth in her mind. And by the time we left for spring break, she was typing like 35 words a minute with 98% accuracy. And so to just be a home that's safe, to have those conversations where you can be protected from shame, but not from struggle, where you can sort the truth from the lies and learn to speak the truth to yourself in those moments when it's going to be hard, because we would like for our life to not be hard for our kids. But life will always be hard for our kids. We know that because we're older than they are, and life is still hard for us.
Yeah.
So we get to equip them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can say this will work for spouses too, because I still don't love spelling. And so when Joanna proofs anything or looks anything over, she always says to me, you're such a creative speller. And so, we can find positive ways to speak life into our spouses too. So.
Yes. Doug and I have a funny. Doug and I have 5 children and 12 grandchildren, but I have 2 biological children and he has 3. So together we have 5. This is not our first marriage, and so we actually take delight in building new habits in post-traumatic relationships. And we have a funny saying that we use with one another sometimes. When you say something and you realize that you stepped on an old landmine, we'll say, did you just fall in an old rut, or did I push you there? It's just a funny way of saying, okay, I know something's up. Can we talk about it?
Right.
But there are ways to speak life, even in hard moments.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, well, I have the blessing of following you on social media, where I get encouragement from you every day. And one thing that I hear you say all the time, over and over, and I just love it, is that there is great hope. And if you're telling us today, and we're acknowledging today, that we are raising our kids in a pretty broken system and a very broken culture, where does our hope come from?
I say there is great hope, and thank you for following me. That humbles me, but I say there is great hope because I have experienced that hope, and I even say this, that there is great hope is the grammar of the gospel. It is the hope and the language of Jesus. And I like to say this, that when we say that I have a struggle, in the language of Jesus, that is an incomplete sentence. I have a struggle and I have a helper. Therefore, there is great hope, right? The problem is real, and my source of help is real too. So there is great hope. And hope is a reality of the gospel, not because we will not struggle, but because we will, and we don't have to struggle alone. And struggle is not where the period belongs in the sentence. If you're going to put something there, put a comma or a semicolon. But there is great hope is the end of the sentence because of Jesus, and because I am in him and he is in me, and I am never alone in my struggle. And I have a source of a strength that is greater than if I just had to do life by myself. That is my hope.
Yeah, and I know we have that hope for our kids too, because we can call on that God who loves us to help us meet our precious kids' needs. And,
Yes.
yeah. And, I know you've created some amazing resources and services for parents who are just looking for support for their family as they educate their kids. Could you tell us more about the help you have to offer and where we can go to find it?
Yes. And thank you. We have created just a vast amount of resources. And one thing that I would point you to, if you enjoy listening to Joanna and Rob as a married couple do a podcast, Doug and I do a podcast. It's called Love is Fearless. And you can find Love is Fearless on any of your podcast providers, or you can go to janetnewberry.com and go to the Love is Fearless tab. Currently, we have 98 episodes there on lots of different topics. And so if you like to hear married people talk about hard things in a culture of love, in a language of love, and our goal is to build a lifestyle of love for ourselves and our relationships, then please join us on the Love is Fearless podcast. And you can go to john15academy.com as well. John 15 Academy is a resource that you could benefit from if you are a homeschool family and you want to offer something more than traditional education. We call it transformational education, where we're helping children grow up, not simply measure up. And there is a wealth of resources to coach you in learning to relate with your children in these kinds of transformational relationships, as well as you get access to me and some lists of curriculum choices and worthy work to pursue and an online group. But even if you're not a homeschool family, if you're just a family that is struggling right now, you recognize that there's some problems that are not finding healing in your family and your relationships with your children, I would also recommend John 15 Academy because our tagline for this resource is really two things: strengthening families and repurposing education. And the resources that are available there are a lot of resources for families. And our online classes are included with that membership that are about loving your child on the road to maturity and connect and reconnect at home, as well as if you join the Academy, you get a 60% discount on my private consulting fees. And so sometimes you just need one-on-one help. And so if consulting is something that you would like to connect with me about, I'm going to suggest that you join the Academy for the benefit of the discount, but also for the benefit of the resources that are there when we're not in direct communication with each other. So you can follow me on Facebook, Janet Newberry, and my Janet Newberry author page. You can follow me at Janet_Newberry on Instagram. And I do post pretty frequently on social media. So hopefully those free resources would be available to you. But janetnewberry.com and john15academy.com. You can find me either place.
Oh, that's great. And I know your book has really challenged us to look at our kids' learning in a whole new way. So can people find your book in those locations as well?
Yes, there's a link to buy my book on either website, as well as you can buy it on Amazon. So Education by Design, Not Default, How Brave Love Creates Fearless Learning is available on Amazon, on john15academy.com, and janetnewberry.com.
Awesome. And before we close today, we were just hoping you might pray for the parents whose kids are struggling in school, or who may be having to make a hard decision with their schooling choice, or just maybe, just how they can walk alongside and support their kids through this school year. We'd love to have you pray to close this out.
Yes, I'd be honored. Oh, dear Heavenly Father, thank you that you are near, and that you are real, and that you are with us, and that you are for us, and that you are particularly fond of us even on our worst day. And God, it feels like some days all days are worst days, and they seem to stack up, especially when our children are struggling. And so I just pray that you would be so real to parents who are struggling right now, because their kids are struggling right now, and that you would make yourself so known to them in their spirit, in their real world, in their conversations with friends, even in a silly post they find on Facebook, Lord, that it would encourage them in the ways that you know meets a real need in their hearts. And so, Lord, teach these parents that love is a process of meeting needs, and that you are their lover, and that you are there for them. And Lord, let them do more than know that. Let them experience that reality in their lives, because you point them to new friends and new resources, and you point them to practical ways of meeting their needs. And Lord, when their needs are met with love, they are so much more equipped to meet their children's needs with love. And Lord, that's our prayer, is that you would equip us as parents to meet our children's needs, their real God-given needs, the ones they wake up with every day, in the ways of love, not in the ways of controlling or manipulating or just requiring them to comply, but God, in their heartfelt, connected and healthy relationships, true identities, that you would help us do that, God. If they need to make a change about their child's education, give them an extra dose of courage and an extra dose of wisdom, and give them a friend that will walk beside them in that change. And God, if they need to stay where they are, give them an extra dose of wisdom and an extra dose of courage and some extra perseverance, God, and some wisdom and good friends to walk with them through the current struggle. And God, just remind us all, so that we can remind our children that you are delighted with us because of who we are, not because of how life is for us right now. And remind us daily that we can depend on you, that you are our helper. You are not our evaluator or our judge. That ended at the cross. So I just pray that you give these parents the peace to trust you in protecting them from shame and helping them in their real struggles. And we are confident that you will answer this prayer in love, in the strong and precious name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Well, Janet, thank you for that. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and to give us a fresh vision for our kids' learning. May God bless you and your ministry to families.
Thank you so much. And God bless you and Growing Home Together. It's so fun to reconnect after all this time.
Yes.
Thank you for the invitation to join you on your podcast.
Yeah, we're glad you could be here. And thank you, friends, for joining us today on Growing Home Together podcast. We'd love to connect with you as well on our website, growinghometogether.com. You'll find some fun and free activities to share with your kids, and a link of resources to pray for your kids as well if you want some guided prayers throughout the school year. If you're a mom and dad of a teen, you can also check out our Praying for Your Teen Facebook group. At Growing Home Together, we're caring for the soul of your family.
And we're growing home together with you. Bye-bye.
Bye.